Welcome back, everybody. This is a really short, sweet lesson, and it's just regarding the Third Amendment. I say that because the Third Amendment, while it sounds really cool, realistically isn't ever used. Real quick note about this class, I'm referring to it as a bonus class. That's because there is no homework or prep work for this class. This is just for you to get some information about the Third Amendment and why we don't talk about it. Realistically. The text of the Third Amendment is that no soldier in time of peace be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. And I said we don't often talk about this, and that's because, in effect, there's only one case dealing with this. This is not something that the United States did often, and that's principally because the way that we use military has changed significantly since the reason for this amendment has come into play. It used to be, before the Revolutionary War, that one of the major grievances that the colonists had with the king was that they were using private homes to quarter troops. That's because there weren't forts, there weren't established military things like we have now, or like they might have had back in Great Britain, and it was very common for officers to live in the homes of the land that they were encamped on. So while the troops would probably live in tents and stuff like that, the officers would live in the home. Again, homes were also different too, because your house would have been somewhat self-sufficient. You would have had things like livestock and fields and crops. Even people who had more urban existences typically would have some sort of agrarian lifestyle as well. When we look at Boston Commons, for example, something in the middle of one of our most historic cities, that was originally a place for cattle to graze. Let's talk about the only case that interprets the Third Amendment. And this case is Engelblom versus Carey. It's a little bit of a different citation than what you guys are used to. Usually you're used to me citing to the United States Reporter. This is citing to the Federal Reporter second edition. And the reason for this is, as you can see in the parenthetical citation at the back, it's a Second Circuit opinion. That means it's a Court of Appeals opinion rather than a Supreme Court opinion. The facts of this case are that there was a prison that was guarded by employees who were employed as prison guards. Part of their employment was that they got to live in these houses. But the prison guards wanted more compensation, so they went on strike. Because of this, because we can't leave prisoners unguarded and untaken care of, nobody was there to feed them, nobody was there to let them out of their cells, the governor for the state brought in troops from the National Guard who were going to work at the prison. These troops were placed into the homes of the various prison workers because the site was remote. This was the only housing in the area. The issue in the case is this permissible under the Third Amendment? The rule, of course, is going to be the Third Amendment. The application here is weird because I'm going to give you a heads up. The court actually doesn't address the Third Amendment's applicability at all. The first part is that the homes were owned by the state, and these were given to workers as part of their employment. When they began to strike, they were no longer in compliance with their employment contracts. As they weren't holding up their end of the contract, the state was no longer obligated to provide them housing. Therefore, at the time they went on strike, the properties which they were enjoying the use of went back to the state, and the state could put whoever they wanted in there. Therefore, the Third Amendment does not really apply in this case, and because of that, the government can repurpose the homes. Notably, the court didn't address whether or not this was permissible under the Third Amendment because they simply skirted the issue by saying, hey, no, this is a contract case, not a Third Amendment case. So now you know why it's often that I say we're not going to talk about the Third Amendment in most of my classes, and why this is a right that most people don't really know anything about. It's 100% because it's often not interpreted. Everybody have a great night, and I will see you for the next lesson on searches and seizures.